The Rosewood Theater had once been the pride of the town, an ornate red brick building with fading gold trim and heavy velvet curtains that still smelled faintly of old makeup, hairspray, and dust. By 1996, it was mostly used by the local high school for student productions. But even faded, it still carried a kind of weight, the kind that made your voice sound louder than you meant and made silence feel like something living. It was April 10th, a Wednesday, and the auditorium lights buzzed quietly as the final rehearsal for The Winter's Mask began. The play was obscure, dramatic, full of long monologues and eerie transitions. The 5 senior girls in the cast had poured months into it, and this final run-through was meant to be closed. No teachers, no parents, no distractions. Just the cast, the crew, and the tension that always came right before opening night. Cassie Monroe, 17, stood center stage, her gold locket catching the dull spotlight. She was the lead, sharp-featured, naturally composed, the kind of girl teachers called mature beyond her years. Everyone said the role had been written for her, even if the play was decades old. Her voice rang with calm control, but her fingers kept toying with the locket. To her left, Tara Hughes, also 17, adjusted her costume sleeves a little too often. She was Cassie's co-lead and her quiet rival. Their chemistry on stage was undeniable, but offstage the tension was palpable. Tara always stayed a few beats too long in Cassie's shadow. Tonight, her lines came out just a touch too fast. Behind them, in the dim wings, Bianca Price, 15, twirled absent-mindedly in her costume shoes. Her role was small, but she loved it anyway. She had that wide-eyed brightness that made her look even younger than she was. Her older sister used to be in the theater too, but Bianca was the only one of the group still new to this whirl. She hadn't yet learned to be wary of it. Near the edge of the stage, June Keller, 16, sat quietly with her script folded in her lap. She was the soul of the cast, soft-spoken, observant, with a mind that wandered often but never missed the important things. In her backpack, zipped carefully into a side pouch, was a sketch of the stage she'd drawn that morning. In it, the curtains were open, but the stage was empty. And then there was Mina Brooks, 16, who hadn't been part of the cast at all until a month ago. She'd started as a costuming assistant, pinning hems and steaming dresses in the back room. But when one of the original cast members dropped out, Mina stepped in. Her nervousness never faded. She clutched her tube of red lipstick like it was a lucky charm, reapplying it between every scene. She didn't speak much, unless spoken to, and she never stayed after rehearsal if she could avoid it. At 4:03 p.m., the girls ran through their final act. The director, Robert Mallory, a graying, meticulous man with a clipboard always tucked under his arm, watched from the 4th row. He barely said a word, only nodded, scratched a note, or quietly adjusted a stage light. The script ended with all 5 girls stepping behind the side curtain to change for the imaginary next scene, a transition that would normally involve a blackout and a brief costume change. They exited the stage, one by one, in silence. Cassie first, then June, then Bianca, Tara, and Mina. Robert glanced at his watch. 5 minutes passed, then 7. The stage remained empty. He stood and cleared his throat. "Girls?" No response. He walked to the edge of the stage, called again. "You're due back for the closing lines." Silence. Only the hum of the overhead lights. Backstage was quiet. Too quiet. He turned to Angela Royce, the makeup artist who had just stepped back in from the dressing room hallway. "Did they pass you?" Angela shook her head. "No one came by. I thought they were still running lines." Mallory frowned and walked off stage. The curtain swayed slightly as he passed through. The hallway behind the wings was narrow, low-ceilinged, with mismatched paint and scuffed tile floors. Dressing room 2, the girls' room, was closed, not locked, just closed. He pushed the door open slowly. Empty. No costumes, no bags, no rustling, no whispers, no scuff marks, spills, or signs of panic. Their personal items, backpacks, water bottles, even June's sketchbook, were still there. But the girls were gone, all 5. as if they had stepped into that dark backstage corner and disappeared with the sound cue. Mallory checked the side exits. Angela called through the prop room. Another student assistant searched the lobby, thinking it might be a prank. But by 4:35 p.m., the only people left in the theater were adults, staring at each other in confusion and rising dread. The final rehearsal had ended without a curtain call. The first official call to the police was made at 4:42 p.m., precisely 39 minutes after the 5 girls vanished. It was Robert Mallory himself who made the call, his voice steady but flat. 5 students are missing, from inside the Rosewood Theater. No, not the parking lot, from inside the building. At first, the officer on the line asked if it might be a prank. It wasn't. By 5:15 p.m., the Rosewood parking lot was lined with flashing cruisers. Uniformed officers paced the building perimeter. 2 K-9 units arrived within the hour. Parents began pulling up one by one, summoned by urgent calls from the school office. Some were confused, some were annoyed, some didn't know their daughters were even at rehearsal. By sunset, panic had settled in. The theater was locked down, the doors were sealed. Forensics swept the dressing rooms. Cameras flashed as crime scene techs combed the floors for prints. But this wasn't a place built for modern surveillance. There were no security. Cameras backstage. No card swipes, no digital records, just a clipboard of attendance signed in blue ink and the smell of cold stage lights fading out. Grace Hughes, Tara's mother, was the first to raise her voice in the lobby. "They were just children," she shouted. "Why weren't you watching them? How does 5 girls disappear from a room with one door?" No one answered her, because no one knew. The next day, April 11th, school was canceled. Police officers stood at the school entrance speaking to teachers and students. Reporters waited in cars outside the lot, holding disposable cameras and notepads. Flyers were printed, fast and grainy, 5 faces, 5 sets of school photos in uneven lighting, taped to telephone poles and store windows by noon. By Friday, the local news ran the headline, "5 theater girls vanish backstage. Town in shock." Everyone had a theory. Some believed it was a runaway pact. Others whispered about the prop room, how it connected to a crawl space no one had used in years. One neighbor claimed she saw a white van near the theater exit. Another swore she heard crying behind the auditorium the night before. Most theories didn't survive the week. Detective Leonard Dyer, a 43-year-old with a thin mustache and a record of keeping things close to the vest, was assigned to the case. He didn't like public speculation. His voice, when addressing the town meeting, was calm but unhelpful. "There is no evidence of abduction at this time," he repeated. "No signs of forced entry, no blood, no known threats. We are continuing to interview students and staff." But what he didn't say, what the community began whispering behind closed doors, was that the dressing room door had been shut but not locked, and no prints were found on the handle. None, not even the girls. That detail never made the news. In the first week of the investigation, every adult tied to the theater was questioned, repeatedly. Robert Mallory, Angela Royce, the janitor, the lighting assistant, the custodian on shift. No one had seen the girls leave. No one remembered anything unusual. Angela mentioned something odd. She found a single lipstick tube tucked behind the sink the night they vanished. Bright red, twisted all the way up, untouched. But it wasn't in her kit, and she didn't recognize the brand. It was logged into evidence, and forgotten. By April 18th, the community started changing. Parents began walking their kids to school again. Rehearsals were suspended indefinitely. The Rosewood Theater was quietly closed for repairs. And the story stopped leading the news. In interviews, Cassie Monroe's mother described her daughter as strong-willed. She believed Cassie would have fought if someone tried to take her. June's father disagreed. He said June was quiet, internal. She wouldn't have caused a scene. Bianca's older sister couldn't even speak on camera. She simply held a pair of glittery flats in her lap and nodded when the reporter asked if they were hers. They weren't. They were Bianca's. Weeks passed. Then months. No suspects, no confessions, no bodies. Just 5 bags in the evidence locker, a stage script with highlighted lines, a red lipstick tube, and a town growing quieter by the day. In June of that year, the official classification changed from missing to presumed runaway. No charges were filed, no alerts remained active, and slowly, unbearably, the case went cold. The Rosewood Theater had 2 dressing rooms, one for the boys, hardly used, one for the girls, room 2, tucked behind the main stage, past the makeup counter and the old props closet. The door was painted pale green, chipped at the edges, and stuck slightly when closed. When police opened it the day of the disappearance, they found nothing and everything. The room smelled faintly of talcum powder, synthetic wig hair, and cheap perfume. Cassie's denim jacket was folded neatly over the back of a chair. June's pencil sketch, a soft, eerie charcoal drawing of the stage with no one on it, was inside her open backpack. Bianca's costume shoes sat side by side near the corner, one toe pointing slightly inward. Tara's earrings were on the vanity table. Mina's bright red lipstick had been left behind too, though Angela swore that wasn't her shade, and none of the other girls were seen wearing it. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken window, no displaced furniture. The mirror bulbs were all cold, but something about the silence of the room was wrong. Too still, like the absence wasn't passive, like it had shape. Detectives began diagramming the layout of the theater, trying to understand one thing. How could 5 girls exit that room without being seen? The possibilities were limited. The main hallway out of dressing room 2 led directly to the stage wings. 2 adult staff, Mallory and Angela, were standing on either side of the hallway during the entire scene change. They swore they never saw the girls come back out. The back door to the theater was alarmed. When tested the next morning, it triggered the same sharp tone it always had. No reports said it had sounded. There was, however, one overlooked space. Behind the props closet was a narrow maintenance crawl space, used in the 1970s when the building still had a boiler. It hadn't been mentioned on any blueprint since 1982. It led beneath the stage, ran along the base of the auditorium, and ended at a rusted maintenance hatch that opened behind the building, just past the tree line. The door had been painted shut years earlier, or so they thought. When Detective Dyer ordered it opened, they found fresh scratch marks on the inside of the hatch, and a single ballet flat, child-sized, glittery. It matched Bianca's shoes. Angela, the makeup artist, was questioned again. She stuck to her story. She never saw the girls after they exited the stage during rehearsal, but when she was asked why she never reported the lipstick behind the sink until the next day, her story wavered. "I just thought someone left it. It didn't seem like a big deal," she said. But the forensic team found something else, a tiny smear of that same lipstick on the inside of the crawlspace hatch. It was faint, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. Which raised a bigger question. If the girls left through the crawlspace, why? An assistant stagehand named Will Pritchard, 18, gave a statement 2 weeks into the investigation. He'd been responsible for controlling the curtain rigging and helping with light cues. He wasn't a suspect. He had been up in the fly system above the stage most of the time, but he mentioned something no one else had. He said that about 10 minutes before the girls vanished, he saw Mina Brooks standing alone in the hallway, outside the dressing room, talking to someone. When asked who, he hesitated. "I thought it was Angela, but now I'm not sure. The lights were weird. There was a lot of shadow." "Could you see what they were saying?" He shook his head. "Could you hear anything?" Will paused. "Not really, just..." Mina said something like, "Are you sure?" And then she looked back toward the dressing room. The detective asked again, was he positive it was Mina? Will hesitated. "I think so. She had the lipstick on." That part raised alarms, because Mina was never seen wearing lipstick that day. She'd taken it out, held it, applied it during past rehearsals, but not this time. And the police had it logged as evidence, untouched. So who was Will actually seeing? That statement was noted and quietly filed, because 2 weeks later, Will Pritchard was found unconscious at the bottom of the fly system ladder. He'd slipped, or so the report said. Concussion, minor sprain, no long-term injury. But afterward, he stopped talking about the hallway. He transferred schools the following fall. The crawl space was boarded up. No print, no blood, no clear answer. Just one shoe, one lipstick smear, and a final witness whose memory refused to stay consistent. Whatever happened in dressing room 2, the room remembered. But the people around it, one by one, began to forget. By the end of 1996, the theater seats had gathered dust. The velvet curtains remained drawn, and the doors to dressing room 2 were kept locked, not by police order, but by quiet agreement. No one asked for rehearsals to return. The spring play was never rescheduled, and the Rosewood Theater sat in its aging frame like a haunted organ no one dared touch. 5 girls gone, 5 families changed. Cassie Monroe's parents moved away within 6 months. Her locket was never found. The house they left behind was sold to a couple with no children. In interviews, her mother repeated the same sentence every time. Cassie wasn't the kind of girl who ran away. Tara Hughes's father became a public advocate. He printed updated flyers, ran newspaper ads, even stood outside the police department every Sunday holding a sign that read, "5 missing, no answers." Eventually, he stopped talking about her altogether. June Keller's mother refused to change a thing in her daughter's room. The sketchbook on the dresser remained untouched. She once told a journalist, "The hardest part isn't the grief, it's the not knowing, the silence. That's what breaks you." Bianca Price's older sister dropped out of school. She started working at a diner near the highway, and when asked about her sister, she'd always say, "She was the only bright thing in that house." She never visited the theater again. Mina Brooks's name slowly disappeared from conversation. Her parents rarely gave interviews. Her absence was folded into the background, like she'd been a ghost even before the night she vanished. For a while there were flickers of hope. A girl seen boarding a bus in Wyoming. A call from a woman in Tulsa claiming to know something, a psychic who claimed the theater was built on sacred ground. Each time the leads unraveled. Each time the town sighed deeper into silence. In the spring of 1998, the Rosewood Theater quietly reopened, not for performances but for storage. Costumes were boxed. Set pieces were piled against the back wall. Room 2 was relabeled on the blueprint as unused. And no one spoke about the missing girls in public anymore. It wasn't denial. It was survival. Then came the detail no one noticed, or pretended not to. In late 1999, the school's part-time makeup artist, Angela Royce, moved out of state. No announcement, no farewell, no forwarding address. When her W-2 form was returned undeliverable, the office clerk shrugged. She probably just moved, they said. But when Detective Dyer tried to follow up, just to close the loop, he found nothing. No updated license, no phone bill, no activity after the summer of '99. Angela Royce was simply gone, like the girls. By 2003, the case was considered officially cold. Dyer, now silver-haired and visibly tired, retired from the force and refused all interviews. The town stopped asking questions. A new theater director was hired. He repainted the front lobby, replaced the old light rigging, started rehearsals again, but only for the junior classes. Room 2 was still locked. The janitor kept the key in a drawer and never used it. He said once, when asked, "It's just better that way." But on the 7th anniversary of their disappearance, April 10, 2003, something changed. A maintenance worker clearing out an old prop trunk found a sealed envelope tucked beneath a false bottom. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting unfamiliar. There was no name, no date, no return address. Inside was a single line written in pencil. They didn't run, they were taken, and someone knows. The envelope was handed to police. No fingerprints, no ink match, but it reignited whispers in coffee shops, on porches, in classrooms taught by those who still remembered the missing 5. And then, the theater's new director made a quiet decision. He unlocked room 2 just once, and on the back wall, faintly written in red lipstick, barely visible in the bad light, was a single word: stay. It hadn't been there in 1996, or at least, no one had seen it. It was spring again. April in the town of Bellwood brought the same chilled wind that tugged at the window panes and carried the scent of damp sidewalks and budding branches. But in 2013, it also brought a phone call. The call came from a volunteer at the Bellwood Historical Society. a small, aging building tucked between a shuttered bakery and a vacant bookstore on Main Street. The woman on the line, Elise Banner, sounded unsure at first. "I'm not sure who else to call," she told the operator. "We were sorting old estate boxes, and we found something strange. It might be connected to the Rosewood case, the missing girls." Within 24 hours, Detective Jenna Roswell, newly assigned to the county's reopened cold case unit, was standing inside the dusty back room of the Historical Society, staring at a cardboard box marked in fading ink, A. Royce, Stage Kit, 1996. The name hit like a small shock. Angela Royce, the theater's makeup artist, the woman who had quietly vanished in 1999 and hadn't been heard from since. The box had been donated anonymously as part of a bulk drop-off from an estate clear-out. The label had gone unnoticed until a volunteer spotted a broken mirror inside, and a photo curled behind it. Detective Roswell, careful and methodical, opened the box with gloved hands. Inside, there were remnants of stage life, old brushes, dried powder compacts, a half-empty bottle of setting spray. Nothing unusual until she reached the false bottom. There, hidden beneath a stained towel, was an unlabeled VHS tape and a folded envelope with 5 names: Cassie, June, Tara, Bianca, Mina. No last names, no date, just the names. Roswell's stomach turned. The tape was digitized and played in a secured room at the precinct that afternoon. The footage was grainy, dull gray lighting, fixed angle, a camcorder likely placed on a tripod. The frame showed dressing room 2, confirmed by the chipped paint near the vanity and the cracked mirror at the edge. The timestamp read April 9, 1996, the night before the girls vanished. There was no audio, just silent footage. At first, nothing. Then, one by one, the girls entered the frame. Cassie Monroe adjusting her hair, Tara Hughes applying mascara, Mina sitting cross-legged on the floor, flipping through her script, Bianca smiling at something off-camera, June scribbling something on a napkin. Normal, candid, unaware. They moved through the room like a familiar dance, laughing, gesturing, going about their routine. But then, near the end of the tape, something changed. The camera glitched for one frame, and when it resumed, Mina was staring directly at it. Not curious, not confused, just staring. She stood up, walked toward the edge of the frame, bent down, and covered the lens with her hand. The screen turned black. That was the last frame. Detective Roswell rewound it again and again, watched it with digital enhancement, zoomed in. Mina's expression wasn't scared. It was deliberate. Not frozen, not confused, just knowing. This tape shouldn't have existed. There were no records of anyone filming rehearsals, no reason for a private recording in the girls' dressing room, and no one, not even the girls' families, had ever mentioned this tape or any camera in that room. Why had Angela kept it? Why had she hidden it? Why was it never logged during the original investigation? The case file was reopened officially. News leaked by the end of the week. Local headlines exploded. Unseen tape of missing girls surfaces, 17 years later. Cold case shocker. Video found in makeup artist's belongings, family's recontacted. The footage wasn't released publicly, but screenshots were shown in private. Cassie's mother wept. Bianca's sister refused to look, and June's father simply asked one question. Why was Mina looking at the camera? Theories exploded online. Was it a prank gone wrong? Was Angela involved? Did Mina know something, or was she trying to protect the others? What else did that box contain? 2 more items. A theater program from 1996 circled in red pen, and a handwritten note folded tightly and sealed with lipstick. When unwrapped, the note read, "It wasn't meant to be them, but once it started I couldn't stop it. I didn't know who else to tell." No signature, just a single fingerprint, smudged, partial, but under analysis it matched Angela Royce. Now the question was no longer just, what happened to the 5 girls that night in 1996? Now it was. What did Angela see? What did Mina know? And why, after all these years, was the tape never destroyed? For nearly 2 weeks after the VHS tape surfaced, Detective Jenna Roswell barely left her desk. She watched the footage dozens of times, minute by minute, frame by frame. Cassie twirling her hair, Bianca mouthing song lyrics, June tracing letters into her thigh with her finger, a habit her mother would later say she always did when nervous. But Mina was different. The other girls were animated, busy, unaware. Mina was watchful, and when she stood, walked directly toward the camera and reached out with an open palm. It didn't feel like performance. It felt like a warning. The team brought in a forensic video analyst from Salem. Her name was Dr. Nadine Harrow, a specialist in degraded analog footage. She ran the video through enhancement software, filtering layers of grain, stabilizing the frame, sharpening low-light detail. On the third day of analysis, Dr. Harrow called Roswell into the lab. "There's something I want you to see," she said, adjusting the timeline bar on the screen. She played the clip again, just seconds before Mina covered the lens. But this time, the playback was slowed to 12% speed. She zoomed in. Just behind Mina, in the far corner of the room, near the utility shelf, something flickered. At full speed, it looked like shadow movement. At slowed speed, it looked like a figure. A shape, vaguely human, partially obscured behind the clothing rack. No face, no detail, just the unmistakable outline of someone, or something, standing completely still. When Roswell leaned in, her voice was dry. "That's not one of the girls." Dr. Harrow nodded. "Correct. And that figure? It's not there in any earlier frames. It only appears in the last 6 seconds of footage, and then disappears entirely." The room went cold. The timeline of events had always followed one path. The girls exited the stage. They went to change. They were never seen again. But now, someone else had been in the room. Not the director, not Angela, not the janitor. No one logged, no one seen, no one expected. Just standing there, watching. Roswell's team began reconstructing the timeline again, re-interviewing staff, checking records, looking at everyone who had access to the backstage hallway that night. They found nothing new, except one curious detail in a custodial log. The hallway light outside dressing room 2 had been reported malfunctioning for over a week prior to the disappearance. The bulb would flicker, sometimes die out completely. It had been replaced twice in 3 days. The repairman who signed off on the third fix? The name was hard to read. D. Reeves, or B. Reens. It didn't match any staff. The number listed beside it, 503-813-XXXX, no longer existed. A disconnected landline. Back at the station, Roswell focused in on Mina's final motion on the tape. Her hand moved slowly toward the lens, fingers spread just slightly. But one moment, just 2 frames, something is reflected in her E. Yes, a mirrored light. Not the overhead bulbs, those were off. It was something else. Something behind the camera. Roswell paused it, zoomed in, sharpened. The reflection didn't make sense. It looked like 2 small points of light side by side, like eyes, but glassy, too round, almost bulbous. She showed it to Dr. Harrow. Dr. Harrow didn't speak. She just stepped back from the screen and crossed her arms tightly. "This was staged," she whispered. She knew someone was watching, not just the camera. Someone else, someone behind it. The VHS tape had been placed in a makeup kit, hidden behind brushes and powder, found only by accident. And Angela, the last adult to see the girls, was long gone. Roswell requested a search warrant for the last known address Angela listed before her disappearance. It was a 3rd-floor walk-up in an old duplex, long since rented to others, but the basement unit had never been cleared. When officers opened the storage cage marked A. Royce, they found water-damaged boxes, a broken garment bag, and a folder of papers tied with red ribbon. Inside the folder, old stage programs, attendance rosters, a sheet of names with times next to each, and scrawled at the bottom, beneath a line of smeared lipstick. All 5 signed in, but no one signed them out. "Why did I lock the door?" The door. The dressing room door had been found closed, not locked. But Angela, in this scribbled note, claimed she locked it. That contradicted the official report. That one inconsistency unraveled everything, because if the door was locked, the only way out was through the crawl space. And the only person who could have unlocked that crawl space from the inside was already in the room. Roswell sat alone that night in the evidence room. She replayed the VHS clip again, freezing on Mina's eyes. In that flicker of reflection, just be. For the camera was covered, Mina wasn't panicked. She was aware, like she knew something no one else did, like she'd seen who was watching them. And for the first time in 17 years, Roswell realized something. Maybe the girls didn't vanish because they were taken. Maybe they vanished because they were trapped. It had been 17 years since anyone had stepped inside the prop storage room behind Rosewood's west wall, not since the back hallway was boarded up and the broken floodlight above the stairwell was finally removed. On paper, the prop room was listed as structural storage, a cramped L-shaped space once used to store extra flats, broken set pieces, and rigging. But after the incident, it had become more myth than memory. Students joked about it, faculty avoided it, and the keys had long since vanished from inventory. Until now. Detective Jenna Roswell, armed with Angela Royce's last note and a new search warrant, ordered a structural reevaluation of the Rosewood Theater. Engineers arrived in April 2013, just weeks after the VHS footage surfaced. Blueprints were pulled, walls were tapped, and eventually, one technician stopped near the northwest corner of the prop room, eyes narrowing. "There's a cavity behind this wall," he said, knocking lightly. A false wall. At some point in the theater's renovation during the mid-'80s, someone had built over a recessed space, maybe to cover damage, maybe to seal it away. The panel came off with a slow, cracking sound. And behind it was a door. A narrow wooden door painted the same shade of green as dressing room 2. No handle, just a faint smudge where palms had once pushed. Forensics arrived within the hour. No one said much as they pried open the hidden door. The space inside was just 6 feet by 10, concrete floor, no windows, and dead silent, the kind of silence that doesn't echo. The first thing they noticed was the smell, dry wood, rusted metal, something faintly chemical. The second thing was the chair. A single wooden theater chair, not bolted down, just resting, there, facing the door. On the seat, a red headband, a glittery ballet flat, a paper crane folded from sheet music. Each item matched objects described by the girls' families. Cassie's headband, Bianca's shoe, Tara's origami, which she'd made in art class the day before the final rehearsal. They had been here, all of them. But it was what they found beneath the chair that changed everything. A trapdoor, small, iron-rimmed, bolted shut with 2 rusted latches. When unsealed, it revealed a staircase descending into darkness. Old maintenance stairs, not on any blueprint. The air grew colder as they descended, stale, pressed in, and at the bottom of the stairs was another room. Room B, that's what they called it afterward. Concrete walls, a ceiling barely 6 feet high, and 5 makeshift cots lined side by side. Each had a thin blanket, a small plastic water bottle, a toy or personal object tucked into a corner, a drawing of a stage, signed June, a lipstick cap, a rubber band bracelet, a cracked plastic mirror, a note that simply read, "Day 4, no voices, still here." Everything was covered in a thin film of dust, undisturbed, except the far wall. There someone had written, over and over in what appeared to be charcoal or eyeliner, "No one opened the door. No one opened the door. No one opened the door." Dozens of times. Stacked, looped. Faint smudges where someone had tried to erase them with their palms. There were no remains, no signs of violence, no fingerprints that weren't smudged beyond recovery. But the message was clear. They had been kept there. Held. Hidden. Forgotten. And someone, maybe Angela, maybe someone else, knew about it. Back upstairs, Roswell stood staring into the dim light of the false wall. How had this gone unnoticed for nearly 2 decades? Had Angela helped build it? Had someone sealed the girls away and left them there? Or had they escaped and simply never looked back? That night, Roswell filed a motion to classify Room B as a site of confirmed detainment. The press went wild. For the first time, headlines didn't say, "missing." They said, "The Rosewood Five were here. Underground room confirms captivity." Questions remain. Who sealed the door? But for the families, it was worse than before, because now they didn't just wonder where their daughters went. They knew. They had been right here, beneath the floor, writing messages no one ever read. The news spread quickly. The underground room beneath Rosewood wasn't just a storage area. It was a cell, a secret someone had worked hard to bury. But it was what came after that discovery that changed everything. 2 months later, a small-town nurse in Corvallis, Oregon, filed an unusual report. She had treated a woman named Rhea Halden, a quiet, middle-aged patient who had come in for a simple hand injury. What caught the nurse's attention wasn't the injury. It was the name Angela Royce written on the woman's old medical paperwork, then crossed out and replaced with Rhea Halden in a different pen. The nurse Googled the name that night and called the cold case unit the next morning. Detective Roswell arrived within 48 hours. The woman she found was in her late 40s, worn but composed. She denied everything at first, said she'd never been to Bellwood, never worked in theater, never heard the name Mina Brooks. Roswell didn't argue. She slid a photo across the table, the VHS still, the moment Mina looked into the camera. Angela, or Rhea, didn't touch it. She only stared, and blinked, once. Then, in a whisper, she told me to turn it off. And I didn't. Over the next hour, the story came out in fragments. Angela hadn't planned it. She hadn't locked the girls away. But she knew someone had, and when she realized what had happened, she was too afraid, too ashamed to come forward. "I thought they'd blame me," she said, "so I buried it. All of it. The tape, the keys, the truth." She said one of the girls, she wouldn't say who, had survived longer than the rest. She helped her escape, but wouldn't say where she went. "I made a promise," she said. To who? She wouldn't say. When asked one final question, "Do you remember their names?" she nodded slowly and recited them in order. Cassie, Tara, Bianca, June, Mina. Her voice cracked at the last one. "I still see her," she said, "in mirrors, in dreams, looking back at me." Angela was never charged. There was no hard evidence she had sealed the room, only that she hadn't stopped it. But her testimony confirmed one thing. At least one girl escaped. Where she went was still unknown. To this day, no body was ever found. The Rosewood Theater was permanently closed, the prop room sealed for good. But if you walk past it in the late evening, when the air is still, some say you can still hear 5 names whispered like breath through velvet curtains. And if you listen closely, one name always echoes last: Mina.